Have you ever noticed that weakness in older people often doesn't improve, even with rest or medication? Well, what few people talk about is that certain everyday foods, which seem harmless, can be silently taking away the strength, balance, and even the energy of older people, and worse, some of these foods are offered with the intention of helping, but they do exactly the opposite. Are you making this mistake with someone you love? In today's video, I'm going to show you what elderly people with weakness should absolutely not eat. We'll understand which foods hinder muscle strength gain, interfere with nutrient absorption, and can even accelerate functional decline. If you care for an elderly person, or want to age with more energy and autonomy, stay with me until the end, because this information can make all the difference in the health of someone you love. Every now and then families come to the doctor's office worried about elderly people who are always complaining about weakness, lack of appetite, and saying that they are eating less and less. But you know what? I know this story well. At these times I usually ask, "Mr. William, are you eating properly?" And the classic answer comes, "Oh, doctor, I hardly eat at all. But if I have to snack on something, I'm always in the kitchen." Do you know someone like this? That older person who says they are not hungry, that they can no longer eat properly, but they keep eating junk food throughout the day. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to another video on the channel. My name is Robert. I'm a doctor, professor, and a master's student in the medical school for 17 years. And in today's video, I want to talk to you about an essential topic: what elderly people with weakness should absolutely not eat. You know that older person who is always complaining about being weak, who doesn't eat their meals properly, like they're used to breakfast, lunch, dinner, but still has a little space for a cookie, a stuffed biscuit, or a dessert every day? Let's talk about that now. In today's video, I divided the content into very practical steps. First, why it is so important to avoid certain foods. Then, what exactly should not be on the plate when the body is older and more fragile. And finally, what to do. That is, what action the family or the elderly person themselves can take in the face of this eating pattern that often only worsens health. So let's start by understanding why certain foods, even though they are tasty, can increase physical fragility. And this happens mainly with foods that have low nutritional value, that do not provide protein, an essential element for maintaining muscle strength and functional autonomy in old age. Furthermore, a poor diet can worsen chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and heart failure, conditions that frequently affect the elderly population. Not to mention the increase in inflammation in the body, muscle loss, and difficulty in nutritional recovery in people who already have deficiencies in important nutrients such as iron, vitamin B12, and others. Knowing this, I now want to explain to you clearly what elderly people with weakness should absolutely not eat, and why. Let's start by talking about ultra-processed foods. And then you might ask yourself, but what are these foods after all? They are those ready-made or almost ready-made products that you can easily find in supermarkets. Snacks, packaged cakes, sausages, stuffed cookies, soft drinks. All of these fall into this category. But why should they be avoided, especially by those who are feeling weak? Because they are rich in empty calories. That is, they may fill the stomach, but they do not really nourish. They do not provide the energy needed to keep the body functioning well. In addition, these products are full of sodium and trans fat, which are very bad for the heart's health. They can worsen high blood pressure, aggravate cases of heart failure, and also contribute to something that we fear a lot in older people: loss of muscle mass, also known as sarcopenia. Another group of foods that should be avoided by those who are feeling weak are refined sugars and so-called high glycemic index foods. But what foods are these? We're talking about sweets in general: cakes, white bread, refined pasta, and yes, that pizza that many people love, but that, if consumed frequently, is loaded with ingredients that trigger this problem. These foods cause spikes in glucose and insulin levels in the blood. That is, when you eat them, your glucose levels rise quickly, but then drop sharply. This yo-yo effect on blood sugar levels ends up making your body even more tired. The result? More fatigue, less energy. Not to mention that this type of diet increases inflammation in the body and the risk of metabolic complications, such as worsening high cholesterol and diabetes, or even the onset of these diseases in predisposed people. A third type of food that should be avoided are those rich in saturated fats and trans fats. This includes fried foods, fast food, that quick snack, seemingly harmless but that does a lot of damage to the body over time, and excessive consumption of butter. This type of fat is associated with widespread inflammation in the body and what we call insulin resistance. But what is insulin resistance? It is when insulin, which is the hormone responsible for taking blood sugar to the cells to be used as energy, can no longer do its job properly. And what happens when this becomes constant? First, the so-called prediabetes appears, and if nothing is done, it evolves into type 2 diabetes itself, a serious disease that requires lifelong care. In addition, these bad fats mess up the entire lipid profile, that is, cholesterol and triglyceride levels, and overload the metabolism as a whole. Finally, the fourth group of foods that elderly people with weakness need to avoid are very salty foods. And here you may already know what foods I'm talking about: instant soups, ready-made broth cubes, canned foods and processed cheeses, for example. The big problem here is the excess sodium, which is present in very high quantities in these foods. And this extra sodium, instead of helping, overloads the kidneys, increases blood pressure, and even retains fluid, worsening the feeling of heaviness and fatigue. Have you ever stopped to think that that simple seasoning or the little soup in a packet could be sapping your father or grandmother's energy? These foods are full of salt, and excess sodium, in addition to straining the kidneys, causes blood pressure to rise, retains fluid, and makes the body heavier and more tired. In the elderly, all of this translates into greater weakness and less energy for everyday life. Even those who have never had high blood pressure can end up developing this problem over time without realizing it. And the worst part? These foods still offer little nutritional density. That is, the person eats and eats, but does not really nourish themselves. As a result, the body does not receive the right nutrients to generate energy, and the weakness only increases. Another important point is to avoid foods that are difficult to digest, such as very fatty meats, raw vegetables, and poorly prepared legumes. I even remembered a book I read, Sapiens, by Yuval Harari. In it, the author shows how the ability to cook food was essential for our evolution. In other words, eating too much raw food can hinder the elderly, who already have slower digestion, which is natural with aging. This can cause discomfort and make them avoid more nutritious foods, and also be careful with caffeinated drinks, such as coffee, cola, and energy drinks. These increase the heart rate, cause dehydration, and disrupt sleep, which further intensifies the feeling of weakness. Alcoholic beverages, in addition to causing dehydration, hinder the absorption of nutrients and can interfere with the medications that the elderly person is already taking, worsening the control of chronic diseases or delaying the recovery of other conditions. And if you've made it this far, I ask you to give it a like, because that way YouTube understands that this content is relevant and delivers it to more people who, like you, care about healthy aging. And if it's still available, take the opportunity to rip the video. It really helps this channel that is growing and bringing content to those who want to better care for older people with quality information. So what can you do if you have an elderly person at home, or if you yourself are starting to feel the effects of aging? The first point is simple but powerful. Increase the nutritional density of your diet. And don't worry, this doesn't mean eating more, but rather eating better, foods that really nourish. We're talking about high-quality proteins, such as eggs, fish, lean meats, and dairy products. Complex carbohydrates such as sweet potatoes, quinoa, oats, and even good old pumpkin. Healthy fats such as extra virgin olive oil, avocado, and nuts. All of this helps to restore energy, maintain muscle strength, and avoid that constant feeling of weakness. And there's more, something we often forget. Thirst decreases with age. Therefore, it is essential to encourage the consumption of water throughout the day, as well as caffeine-free teas and nutritious soups, which also help with hydration. Another valuable tip: choose cooked foods, which make chewing and swallowing easier, especially if the elderly person already has some limitation. But if they can still chew well, always keep foods with a firmer consistency, because this increases the pleasure of eating, stimulates the senses, and gives a greater perception of satiety. Regarding supplements such as vitamin D, iron, and B12, they can indeed help, but always under medical supervision. Don't go out and take them on your own. And here's a final very important thought. Avoiding bad foods is just as essential as including good ones. Sometimes we have this idea that we can make up for what we did wrong by eating something healthy later, but it doesn't work that way. The right choice starts with eliminating what's bad for you. It's about being intentional. It's about making conscious choices. And if you've come this far, it's because this content somehow touched you, made sense to you. So take advantage and subscribe to the channel right now, because that's what I talk about here. Not just about health and longevity, but about a slower, more purposeful life, a life with more intention and less rush. Until the next video, a big hug. Bye.